Somewhere in your mouth right now, there is a battle happening. You can't feel it. You can't see it. But it never stops. And for 99% of human history, that battle was one we were losing badly. Not slowly losing. Losing in a way that ended in agony, disfigurement, and sometimes death. So how did something as small as a bristled stick become the reason you'll probably keep every tooth in your head until the day you die? Because for almost all of human existence, that was never the plan. Go back 5,000 years and imagine your teeth are starting to ache. There's no dentist. There's no such thing as a dentist. What you have instead is a barber, a blacksmith, or if you're unlucky, a traveling stranger who claims he knows what he's doing. He doesn't numb anything. He doesn't sterilize anything. He grips a metal tool, braces his knee against your chest, and pulls. People held each other down in the street for this. Screaming was considered part of the process, not a warning sign that something had gone wrong. And here's the part that should terrify you. This wasn't rare. This was Tuesday. Every single person alive before the last 100 years or so was at some point going to lose teeth to rot, and there was nothing anyone could do about it except wait for the pain to get bad enough to justify the pliers. So why didn't anyone just brush? Because for most of history, nobody understood what was actually attacking their teeth. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about acid. What they saw was decay appearing out of nowhere, like a curse, and they treated it like one. Some cultures blamed literal worms burrowing inside the tooth. Physicians described extracting tiny white tooth worms as a cure, when what they were actually pulling out was infected nerve tissue. The idea stuck around for over 1,000 years. People were terrified of a parasite that never existed, while the real cause sat completely ignored in their diet and their hygiene. But here's what's strange. Some ancient civilizations were already stumbling toward the answer, thousands of years before anyone understood why it worked. In ancient Babylon and Egypt, people took soft twigs, chewed the ends until they frayed into a rough brush, and scrubbed their teeth with it. Archaeologists have found these chew sticks preserved from thousands of years ago, some of them from trees with natural antiseptic properties. Nobody knew what bacteria was. They just noticed that the people who did this had fewer problems than the people who didn't. That's the entire foundation of dental care for most of human history. Not science, just repetition of something that seemed to help. The Chinese took it further. Around 1,000 years ago, someone had the idea of attaching coarse animal bristles to a bone or bamboo handle, creating something that actually resembles a toothbrush as we'd recognize it. Hog-bristle, specifically because it was stiff enough to scrub. This design traveled along trade routes into Europe over the following centuries. And Europe's reaction to it tells you everything about how the continent thought about hygiene. They mostly ignored it. For hundreds of years after that hog-bristle brush reached European hands, most people still weren't using anything at all. Teeth were rubbed with rags, cleaned with chalk or salt if you were wealthy enough to bother, or simply left alone. Rotting teeth were so common that black, decayed teeth became briefly fashionable among European elites who could afford sugar. Visible decay was proof you were rich enough to eat sweets constantly. People deliberately let their teeth look worse to signal wealth, while the poor, who couldn't afford sugar, often had healthier mouths by accident. Let that sit for a second. Decay was a status symbol. The very thing destroying people's mouths was something the upper class wanted other people to see. By the 1700s, a French dentist tried to drag the whole field into something resembling science. He argued that sugar and acid, not worms or curses, were dissolving teeth from the outside in. He pushed for regular brushing, for filling cavities instead of yanking every aching tooth, for actually treating dentistry as medicine. Almost nobody listened. Barbers kept pulling teeth in the street for another 100 years because trained dentistry was expensive and slow to spread, while a barber with pliers was everywhere and cheap. Meanwhile, the toothbrush itself was still stuck in a design that should sound familiar by now, a decent idea undermined by one glaring flaw. Hog-bristle held bacteria. It stayed damp between uses. It fell apart quickly, and depending on where the bristles were sourced, it wasn't always clean to begin with. People were scrubbing bacteria off their teeth with a tool that was itself a breeding ground for more bacteria. The fix everyone needed didn't show up until the 20th century, and it came from an entirely different industry. In the 1930s, a chemical company developed nylon. It was durable, it dried fast, it didn't harbor bacteria the way natural bristle did, and it could be manufactured with total consistency instead of depending on whatever an individual hog's coat happened to look like. The nylon-bristled toothbrush that came out of this discovery is structurally almost identical to the one sitting in your bathroom right now. Nearly 100 years later, we haven't needed to reinvent it. But a clean brush was still only solving half the problem, because brushing without anything on the brush barely touches the actual chemistry of decay. And that chemistry needed its own separate fix. For most of history, toothpaste was whatever people could improvise. Ground charcoal, crushed eggshell, powdered bone, salt, ash. Some of it was mildly abrasive and genuinely helped scrub away buildup. Some of it was closer to sandpaper, wearing down enamel over years of use. Nobody was measuring any of this. It was folk remedy stacked on folk remedy, region by region, generation by generation. The real turning point came in the mid-1900s, when researchers noticed something odd about a specific U.S. town. The residents there had dramatically fewer cavities than almost anywhere else studied. The water in that town happened to be naturally rich in a mineral called fluoride. Once researchers isolated that connection, they found fluoride does something remarkable at a microscopic level. It actually helps rebuild and strengthen the outer layer of a tooth faster than acid can break it down. For the first time in human history, there was something that didn't just clean teeth. It made them measurably harder to destroy. Cities began adding fluoride to public water. Companies began adding it to toothpaste. And the rate of childhood cavities, which had been essentially a universal experience for all of human history up to that point, started dropping in a way it never had before. So here's the full arc. For thousands of years, humans didn't understand what was destroying their teeth, so they blamed worms and curses instead of bacteria and sugar. Some cultures stumbled onto crude brushing tools anyway, without knowing why they worked. Europe largely ignored the idea for centuries, while the wealthy treated visible decay as a badge of status. One dentist tried to introduce science into the field and was mostly ignored. Hog-bristle brushes solved the scrubbing problem, but created a bacteria problem of their own. Nylon fixed that. And for most of history, nothing existed that could actually strengthen a tooth from the outside, until one town's unusually healthy teeth led researchers to fluoride. Every single one of those fixes only existed because the version before it was still failing someone. And now look at you. You stand in front of a mirror for 2 minutes, barely thinking about it, holding a tool built from a chemical breakthrough, coated in a compound discovered by accident, aimed at an enemy people spent thousands of years unable to even name.